Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. All right, so I'm not going to lie. Every time I hear that intro, I'm like, is that what I sound like? Like, not in a bad way, but I'm like, is that my voice? Is that what I sound like?
I feel the same way. I always think it's my voice.
That makes sense. That tracks. Yeah. Oh, no, wait. That I think might be Alexis. I'm not positive.
Could be me.
Anyways, welcome everybody to another episode. We're talking about midsummer, the solstice, the changing of the days. We're talking
the
about
longest day of your life.
This year
was May. Was just May in general, the longest day of my life.
Gonna be May.
Yeah. Pretty much the entire thing. But you know, that is farming for most of us. May is like wild time. So it's go time, but also oh god time, but also oh no.
May is the longest month of my life. That speaks to me on a very deep level.
I mean, it could be all of the best of times and the worst of times kind of dichotomy. I don't know.
I mean, May for me was not that, but the concept, the sentiment has cultural significance in my life, much like the midsummer period has across human traditions in different places, and we find ourselves there.
Yeah,
at the midsummer.
Midsummer.
Yes.
I prefer to call it midsummer. That just sounds so much more like good and folksy
and
Germanic.
I like European traditions of midsummer festivals. It seems like when we're in June, I don't consider. I mean, because I'm looking forward to July here in Kentucky, at least in Zone 6 and 7.
Ew, why?
Why? What?
I know this guy, man. This guy.
You are pale as pale can be. How do you like July?
He likes seeing the big numbers on his electricity bill.
I do. I like the hard hitting. Now, growing up, we never had AC, so May was one of my absolute April and May because moderate temperatures. Never had environmental controls. We talked about that on a previous podcast. We did not have those. We had window fans, but I loved the cooler the months. But June was warming up, and July was somewhat miserable, and August could be as well. So temperature wise.
But here you are loving
But now
July?
you look forward to July.
No, I don't look forward. I look forward to summer and the long days.
Gotcha.
I guess I look forward to time after the typical work day, whatever that is.
Yeah, like when the sun's still out, when you get off work, you can do things outside.
Yes, it'll more playtime, more outside time, more gardening time. But it's tough when I go to work and it's dark, and I come back and it's dark.
It's miserable.
Yeah,
I got that.
Ray, I feel like you're making me need to confess. I can't help but jump on a bandwagon when people are dogging on someone like we just all did on you for saying.
But it's fun though. It's fun though.
Yeah, it was very fun to just.
But what are you going to do? Do you have a confession?
I am confirmed officially a hot weather guy.
Are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew a guy like that. No, thank you.
Yeah. I used to hate it. And I just love it. I just feel so alive. Yeah, I'm sweaty and like uncomfortable, and like sometimes when I'm working outside, I feel like
I'm good so far. Yeah.
You feel like you're gonna pass out, and like if you don't drink water, it's not. Yeah, if you don't drink water, it's not like a minor inconvenience. It's like potentially health problems.
Detrimental.
But I will say I
love it. I really do.
Yeah, I will say what I appreciate about it is just when you're drenched in sweat. Like, nobody can tell that you're crying.
True. It's like your whole body's crying.
And even if you were, they could understand why.
Yeah, they'd be like, I get it.
Do I have to pick just hot or cold? Can I just pick the shoulder seasons?
Because my gosh. Yeah. No, you can't pick the shoulder seasons.
Nobody's
America. This is America, land of extremes. It's a two-party system, hot or cold.
I just need to be acclimated. I think the acclimation time period is I'm so pissed off that I'm not like, I can't, I'm like, I was fine last July, but now it's early June and I can't function. And it's like, I don't understand. I haven't acclimated yet. And so I had to give myself a little bit of grace, drink some more water, eat a popsicle or two, and then eventually I get there. I felt a little better after this weekend, but
See, your
I don't.
mistake was whenever you stopped eating popsicles last July.
Yeah.
I just eat them year round.
Just
and
year
I'm
round.
ready to go.
Popsicles.
Ready
My
for
mouth
it.
is hot. What happened?
We,
Yeah.
You never
I don't know
have to
if I
reacclimate. If you
I
never
don't know if
stop,
I
you don't have to acclimate.
told you this or not, but we just got a fridge in the barn that I found on sale, and I got like the
Nice.
first thing that went in there was those popsicles that like cut the sides of your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Old
nice.
Flavor
The
Ice?
push pops.
Yeah.
Flavor
Yeah.
blades.
Flavor,
Yeah.
flavor blades.
My
That was the
brother called
very
them
first
flavor
thing that went in
shanks.
the fridge was barn popsicles. Like, just doesn't nothing
Nice.
hits quite like a popsicle out in the heat. Like,
I like when you kind of get going too fast with the cold stuff and you get like the brain hurt.
you
That's cool.
like that's something you
Yeah,
Yeah,
enjoy.
that's always
Sometimes.
nice. Yeah.
Sadist.
See, I knew you
Ugh.
were a hot weather guy, Josh. After
We're all
all,
admitting it. I don't know. I love the long days, not necessarily the extreme heat, but I do believe that's one of the reasons that I love like woodland areas because that's where the shade is. When
Yeah,
it was
yeah, I
hot
gotcha.
out, you could be under like woodland and it dropped 15 degrees. Like if you got a large canopy overhead, a little breeze going. That's maybe why I love like shady woodland areas is because
Yeah.
if you have to live with that day in and day out and then sleep in that kind of hot weather,
Mhm.
then I grew to love like shady areas. So yeah, and I am blonde headed, fair complected. So
very brief aside, Ray, from a previous episode, you referred to the blue side of the mountain. I think about it all the time.
yeah.
One of the next
yeah.
songs Brett puts
it
out.
Really, I don't know something about that. Woo.
Yeah, it's a
Normal
game
People's
changer.
next album, Blue Side of the Mountain.
It needs to be Normal People's next album. It
I don't
really
know
does.
I don't know if
It's a
we're
big deal.
rustic and like authentically.
I mean, you go to the blue side and there's just ferns and moss I would seek those places out, and particular places with running water in the summer, and you would go there and it's 20 degrees cooler.
Yeah,
Just the rock doesn't accumulate heat,
man.
and
That's
doesn't
where the
give that off
fairies
from the
are.
day. That is
yeah,
where
and
the fairies are.
if you're in that kind of like slope, like that's where my cabin was when I lived out in the eastern part, was like quote unquote the blue side of the mountain, but at
Yeah,
the
the
base
shady
of like
part.
a 1,200-foot ridge, right? So there was just this
Awesome.
constant cool airflow blowing by.
Did you get any sun much during the day, or is it like really, really like a
You
very
never
short
get,
period
like,
of sun?
in order to get sun, you'd have to leave
12 o'clock.
my house, and you'd have to leave my house at noon and walk like 200 yards away. Like the sun never hit that structure.
Yep. It is a different world in winter times. I mean, it can protect you in the wintertime, but I mean, the trade-off is, how do you grow like a garden in those spots? And I got questions like that in the past in a very mountainous county that I covered. People would try to grow gardens and sunlight is the number one limiting factor. In a forest, that's the first thing they teach you in forestry is sunlight's the number one limiting factor. It's not nutrients, it's not moisture, it's sunlight,
Right.
In those places you just are not going to get the sunlight.
Yeah. So your diet becomes mushrooms. It's all good.
Dryland fish and other such
Moss
things that you
tea.
can find in the woods. Yes, moss
Fiddlehead
tea.
ferns.
Different
Fiddleheads
lichens.
are very high in vitamins.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, lots of those around. So
Very
And animals. Let the animal go out into the sunny spot, eat some grass, and then come back, and then you eat the animal. It works out.
It's all
Yes.
great.
yeah,
It's all
it's
great.
part of the
200-yard long leash.
Yes.
However,
very long leash.
on the solstice, you have to find some wildflowers because you have to make a flower crown to wear to ward off the chaos-causing fairies. So,
Did you say
hopefully,
chaos-causing coworkers or fairies?
I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah, whatever.
Just chaos in general.
I'm gonna say it again. The biggest mistake that you would make is not wearing the wildflower crown year round.
Yes, I think
That's
so.
what I do.
It's
It's worked out great for me.
I'm just gonna get it like tattooed across my brow.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
There
will
you go.
definitely slow the chaos in your life down.
Yes, that will.
What were those commercials where the guy was like he'd like get in accidents? Mayhem. It was the guy who was
Yes.
like he was mayhem. I feel like that's where we are here. Like the fairies are mayhem, and you have to wear a flower crown because obviously that is the answer. Wear one.
Well, I will say, prior to when I started working with the very fun but admittedly quite crunchy crowd of the UK South Farm and other affiliated people, I never really observed the solstice or even knew it was happening. But among that type of people, I guess I'm one of them now, the solstice does hold some significance. And across cultures, it has held a lot of significance. We mentioned the kind of midsummer, maypole, Germanic traditions and all these other things that some of which we don't even really understand the origins of. And obviously there are some implications for growing things. It's the daylight, the day length is getting shorter, but I'm curious for you all, it could be directly or just obliquely horticulture related. What does the solstice, the summer solstice, trigger for you all, or how do you think about it? What does it mean? Does this mean anything to you?
I mean, I'll start out. I mean, we all know I like to grow flowers, and so a lot of flowers are daylight sensitive. And so the solstice is the longest day of the year, and that means that after that it starts getting darker. So you lose daylight starting after solstice until, when is it? Late December, and then we start gaining light again. And so for a lot of flowering plants, that this is a cue for them. So once they hit certain amount of daylight hours, they will begin flowering, or they'll begin vegetative growth, or all of them are a little bit different. And so I know I get questions. I see questions on like Facebook groups that I'm in, and I get questions as an extension agent a lot on why are my cut flowers, they're flowering and they're only 3 inches tall. And it's because those plants are going to flower when that light changes, period. It doesn't matter if it's 3 inches tall or 12 inches tall. It's going to start flowering once it hits certain daylight. And so, you have to plant those things early enough to get the plant beefy enough so that it has long stems by the time those hours come along. And so really for me, that's, we don't always think of it as our planting time. We should plant it, in March so that it's beefy enough by solstice. But really, that's what we're talking about is the light change.
What are examples of those types of flowers?
Chrysanthemums are a big one. I think that everybody's pretty familiar with, whether it's like a potted mum, right, that you buy for, the holiday season in the fall, or cutting mums. And so they start to flower I think it's under 12 hours of daylight. Don't quote me on that. Another one that is campanula, which is bellflower. It will flower. It flowers on less daylight. So it's the opposite. It's the opposite. It blooms early in the spring. So once we kind of hit solstice, it's done. It's already flowered and set seed. So those, and some, there's sunflowers that are daylight sensitive, and there's a lot of crops. Some of that has been bred out of plants. That's a big thing now.
That's a big one. Short day. Yeah.
Big commercial crop. Short day. That's why we grow them in the winter here. A lot of the reason why, because we have short days.
And isn't that manipulated commercially?
Yes.
How does that work? I mean, you don't have to rely on the sun.
You put a blindfold on it.
Yes.
Basically, yeah. Like, so there's shade cloth that they put on, and they'll actually interrupt that, depending on where they are in the season, they'll interrupt that. So they'll be dark say they're dark all night, and they're supposed to have, only supposed to have 6 hours of night. But, the night is actually longer than that. In the winter, they'll actually interrupt it with, like sometimes even 5 minutes of light in the middle of the night will interrupt that and reset the clocks for that plant. And so it's like throws it out of whack. But that's how you get them to bloom and set colors.
That feels like
manipulative
torture under the Geneva Convention.
Right.
Like
you can't get more than 10 hours of sleep.
Yeah. But you're feeding them when you do it. It's like, here, wake up and have an ice cream.
Yeah, so they can continue their hellish facade of. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing.
Someone wakes me up at 3 a.m. and is like, I usually am awake anyways at 3 a.m. because I don't know. That's when the fairies come out. I think
you got that 5 minute light that comes on.
Yeah, the 5 minute light, and someone handed me an ice cream. I'd be like, okay,
and then back to bed.
And then right back to bed.
Now, isn't that term? I always think of it as like it, because I think we learned about it described as photoperiodism,
Mm-hmm.
and like photoperiod sensitivity, for those of you that want to look it up and see what it does, because it is plant specific as to what plants are sensitive to it and how the sensitivity comes up, whether it's like
how much
broken, a broken nighttime or shorter days or growing shorter days. It can be all pretty different.
And some plants really don't mind, do they? Either way.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Some plants don't care. Yeah.
They're like,
They're
I just
gonna grow.
give me food, give me water. I will.
I'm thinking of you, zinnias.
Day,
Zinnias that
night,
don't
whatever.
care. They're very neutral. They
Yeah.
they just grow and are beautiful.
Yeah, it's like photoperiod sensitive and photoperiod neutral, I think. Sounds right.
We're gonna go with that. We can trust us. We're professionals.
And the long day stuff is like my favorite garden grass, like tomatoes, peppers, stuff like that. That's like the sun loving long day. But what is it? If you're considered a short day plant, you're typically, it has flowered before the solstice, which this year the solstice, I don't know that we've said it, June 20 at
June
what time
20
is
to
it? Like
21.
4:50
something
p.m.
like that.
exactly, the pole of the air. But if you're a short day plant, you're typically done with the blooming cycle before that. And if you're a long day plant, you bloom or you're growing right around that at the best at around the summer solstice.
And as those days get shorter, so like mums, for example, they want to grow during the longest days, and then once we get to fall and that daylight drops under 12 hours or whatever it is, that is what signals the plant to bloom. So it's kind of somewhat opposite of what you might think.
Yeah.
But yeah, long day plants actually bloom when the light gets less, and short day plants actually bloom when the days hit a certain length, like longer.
Yeah. You can base it. I mean, and some people, you can get caught up in, is it day length or night length? But in the end, it's kind of the same. It's just however you conceptualize that.
Yeah, I read something, and I was doing a little background looking in on some of this stuff, and they talked about the summer solstice being the shortest night of the year, which I think that was the first time I'd ever heard it described that way. And that like some of the folkloric traditions were around, like, since the night is so short, like the spirits are kind of wiling. And so you got to be like kind of careful, because it's just like, I don't know.
The veil is thin.
Yeah, I guess so. I think for me, as far as the meaning of it, it's this really odd marker of when things start to change in the year, but it, unless I was like aware that it was changing in that way, I don't necessarily know that I would know.
In Kentucky, I see June 20th, summer's just getting cranked up. We're just going. I mean, now that may not be true of all parts of the country, but summer solstice is a little bit odd for me. I look forward to the winter solstice. We were talking about this as we were getting ready for the episode today. I look forward to the winter solstice because, I'm going to get more daylight back. But the summer solstice always catches me unless I look at a calendar and say it's going to be June 2024. Yeah. It's like I don't see it being the height of summer. Like that's not happening.
Right. Yeah, it's like
feels like the crack of the whip, where it's
like the start of summer almost.
It is a wake up call.
Yes. But it happens, but then the actual like landing of all of the inertia of the year happens after, it's kind of like a delayed
wind up.
But what were we going to say, Josh? Sorry, I cut you off.
Well, basically the same thing that like we've been getting all these growing lengthier days, lots of solar heat is hitting the planet, but like the actual warmth and the heat of summer doesn't hit till later. Like I don't think of June 20th as the hottest day of the year, just like noon isn't the hottest part of the day. It's like after it's had time to kind of build up. And while doing a little bit of research on this, I was looking at terminology, like how there's like an equivalent to like the midsummer kind of thing. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the word, but in the kind of Chinese lunar solar calendar, they refer to June 22nd-ish, the solstice, as the summer extremity. But, it's a month later that they refer to it as like the great heat of summer. So it's like there's that kind of build up.
Rubber band effect, almost, delayed.
It's like carryover when you're cooking.
Right. So it's like even though the days are getting shorter, the nights are coming in sooner, the heat is like really starting to settle in.
My
which
my
is
brain
good that
doesn't accept like summer solstice until like October, and I know that's totally incorrect. The days literally have to
That
be getting
is
cooler for
wrong.
me to think about it. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, it's kind of nice that I guess at least in our area that the nights start to get longer when the heat is starting to get the worst. So
Mhm.
that could be kind of
Totally.
nice, but yeah, and then from like a plant perspective, like a gardening perspective, we start talking about thinking about at least planning for your fall garden. So even though it's a little bit early, your summer plants may not have even started, to fruit by now. If you put your tomatoes in around Derby Day, you're probably not seeing a whole lot yet, and maybe you are, but so but it's already time to think about, okay, when am I going to rip this out and put the next thing in? Because
Right.
gardening, farming is all about the prep, and you are essentially like at least a season ahead, which is can be great if you're a planner, like if you're like me and I just like love to plan, but it can make it hard to revel in the moment. And so that's always a struggle for me, is like to appreciate what I've grown right now and the successes I've had when it's almost like I'm just now picking it, but it's over for me. Like my brain is just finishing up the crop
Mhm.
because I'm already planning the next one, and that can be a struggle. But it is time to think about your August, September fall garden.
Yeah.
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 It
Especially
is a
longer
real
stuff like
transition. Yeah.
potatoes are like mid-June, so you're there for your
Mm-hmm.
fall garden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the planting for the fall garden, because we think, oh, cool season crops,
Mm-hmm.
kale and broccoli, how nice! It's going to be nice and cool.
Parsnips.
It's not when you're planting them. When you are
No, it is
if
not.
you are planting a fall garden correctly, you are sweating a lot.
Cranky about
Yes.
it.
Very just mad. You need the
These are
as a
cold
hot
weather crops. Why am I
as a
sweating?
hot weather guy, I wouldn't be mad, but a
Mm-hmm.
previous version of myself that was not so big of a fan, yeah, would be quite, and it's almost disorienting in a way,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, you are putting you don't get, if you're doing this professionally or just intensely in general, you aren't coming off of a restful winter, where all your energy and cabin fever and everything else is built up for that spring garden. You're like,
Hmm.
it's hot and it's like, oh man, gotta
I
bail
used to
right
Right.
out
I
wonder
am
here.
why
over
people
the
didn't do
gardening
that.
hobby.
I
Mm-hmm.
just think you've nailed it, Brad. I used to wonder why people. I'm like, when I first started, 'cause I, try to encourage people to maximize their gardens. Have that 3-season garden, and definitely fall garden. The stuff's so much better. Yada yada yada. Your brassicas are amazing, but then I come to realize it's exactly what you just said. The energy and the vibe is totally different when you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to put something in the ground at 100 degrees. Yeah, you don't have that cabin fever, and you're just bursting out with all this energy. You have this energy of, oh my gosh, I've got 1,000 things to do with the family in the summer. So
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm committing
yeah.
another 90 days to
So
this.
I totally get it now. So every now and again, I'll do a let's plant a fall garden kind of program,
Mm-hmm.
just to do that. But they are historically not well attended. Let's put it that way. People
Everyone's
sometimes even
hot
give
and
me the
tired.
stink eye. Yeah, they're like, we're already hot. And this is the home gardeners, not the pro gardeners, not the commercial gardeners, commercial producers. This is the home gardener, where it's a tough sell. It's, as they say, a hard sell in the industry, to do fall gardening. But there are a few gardeners out there that do and undertake those activities and love it. And you do get, crops that are amazing in the fall. But I am
Mm-hmm.
not one of those as far as a home garden goes. I don't, I'm not planting a lot at this time of year. No.
Yeah. And to be clear,
Yeah.
if you are planting a fall garden, you should not be doing it between the hours of 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. Take
Mm-hmm.
advantage of that sun going down or not yet coming up again.
Unless you're
Mm.
like a hot weather guy, then you're just out
If
there
you're a
like
hot weather guy, then
living
you
the
can pretty
dream.
much do it
Wear a
Unless
hat.
whenever you want
unless you
to
can
do
reach
it.
around and put,
I mean,
sunscreen
actually,
on
the
that part of your
plants
back.
don't love the middle of the day either, because they are not like they're hot weather
See?
guys, but also kind of
That's a
not.
great point, Alexis, and you might be able to speak to this. This is the longest day, the most sun we're going to get during the year. Are there plants that need protecting during this time of year that we wouldn't otherwise have to think about?
I
I
mean,
mean,
I don't love. Have I done it? Yes. Will I continue to do it? Absolutely. But I don't like planting, not just personally, but I don't like to put the
Yeah.
plants out when it's full sun.
Mhm.
I like a cloudy
Definitely.
day,
Yeah.
ideally, or I plant in the evening when, you know, it's cooling down, because they are undergoing stress, right? They're, even
Definitely.
if they're perfect transplants that not root bound, they are
They've been
lush
hardened
and just
off.
hardened off. That's the big thing. If they're hardened off and perfect, they're still undergoing a change of scenery, right? Like you're moving your
Mhm.
kids from one place to another. It can be really stressful.
Yeah, and the process of transplanting them is like continually slapping the water bottle out of your kid's hand
Yeah.
as they try to drink and rehydrate, and
Yeah. You're
yeah.
just like squirting it at their face, just like a little at a time. Like, honey, catch
Yeah,
it.
here
Open
you
your
go.
mouth.
You can have your water bottle back after you've settled in, or
Yeah.
after a
Are
few
we
days.
just encouraging people to plant fallgirls or what right now? I mean, we're just so
I just,
encouraging
if
here.
you're, it's, what is it? If you're hot, then they're hot or something, or if
Yeah.
you're
Bring
You're
them
cold, they're
inside
cold.
or
Bring them
something.
inside.
yeah, like there is something kind of poetic about that, of like, do you want to go out and stand in the hot sun right now and not have access to much water?
Mm-hmm.
No, then don't do that to your plants. And like you mentioned, Alexis, and we recently transplanted some stuff, some perennials, and we had it in pots and they were doing fine and watering them, and we had a window to plant them, but it was going to be extremely hot and
Mm-hmm.
extremely sunny for like 3 or 4 days, and so we decided to hold off and plant them and then it's one of those proud moments where like everything works correctly, where you're like,
So rare.
you like put it in the ground as the first water droplet falls out of the
Yes.
sky.
Right. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
That's
like,
so
ah.
satisfying.
Perfect.
For the next like 48 hours, it was
Nice.
overcast, light periodic rains, nothing too deep. It
I
was
Awesome.
got my
like,
dahlias in on that schedule, and I was like, this
oh,
is gold.
yeah.
Gold.
For every one of those,
It's
there's
amazing. They
a
do
lot of
so
fun.
much
Yeah.
better. Like the stress is nothing compared to that if it were a sunny day. And I would remember in watering plants, during the heat of the day, because you're like, oh my gosh, this plant is super dry, and then the soil just turning to concrete. It's
Right.
just so hot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, depending on what type of watering you're doing. But plants, they're growing well typically during that time of year, but that also means they're using probably the largest quantity of water that they're going to be
Mhm.
needing the entire season during that time period. So
And
good to keep in mind.
I do think some, we plants are resilient. They can wilt and bounce back and do all these other crazy things that are amazing, but like there's a difference between surviving and thriving.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
when you push a plant to the point of needing to survive, it's just not going to do as well. And so if you're growing
Mhm.
food, you're not going to get as much food, or it's not going to be as resistant to disease or to insects or whatever. It's going to be more vulnerable. And sometimes it just happens. You just got to do what you got to do. But yeah, I think, something for me subjectively about the solstice that I feel like I notice, and you all tell me if I'm just crazy and this is confirmation
Oh, we
biased
will.
or something. But
Mhm.
I feel that there is a notable um like color change in the foliage of the various trees and other plants, shrubs, mostly perennials, I would say, like in the landscape or in the forest or whatever. Like it goes from this very like,
Mhm.
I would say it goes from a green that has more yellows in it to a
Bright.
green that
Yeah.
has more like darker
Dark
blues.
green.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's like it's almost like there's
It's a,
this, I
m-
don't know, this is
it's a
me getting into,
maturation phase of new
Yeah.
growth. A lot of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Especially
The,
on
the
your
light,
trees.
lime green
along
growth.
with that, I feel like this, energetic like crescendo of a lot of insects, a lot of other, I don't know. I can understand why someone would experience it as a magical time. So you all are telling me there's a botanical underpinning
Scientific.
to what
There's a
I'm.
there's a
Mhm.
physiological thing going on.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for killing my magic.
Thank
I'm
you.
just kidding.
Sorry, it's
Yeah.
science.
I know that there
Yeah,
was, historically, there's, activities like bonfires that celebrated this and everything, the abundance. And I read some things that said the abundance of summer, but yet we're not harvesting a lot of stuff at that time
definitely. Yeah.
yet.
Right.
So I think that's why it's the solstice celebrations historically was if I could break it down, it's kind of the middle kid syndrome. It's like
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
don't get those cool fall like harvest celebration bonfires
Yeah.
that are more predominant, in history. Yeah.
It reminds me, there's in the flower world, we say that June is can be kind of like a dry month for flowers, and I mean that
Yeah.
as in like it can be
Mm-hmm.
uh there's not a ton. So like, we say plant perennials, biennials, sort of these things to fill that June gap, because the the natural thing is that like your spring planted stuff isn't blooming yet. The stuff that overwintered and came through already bloomed, and so we hit this June is often a gap month for a lot of flower growers. So they have to do a lot to really make up for that. And I think trying to think of if it's like that in like the veggie world, because I know a lot of our farmers market people that I've been seeing lately, sort of they're using season extension and things like that to really fill those gaps. But would you say June's kind of a low month even for like produce? Yeah.
It
Yeah,
can
I
be.
would.
I mean, that's buffered out some with the high tunnels, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the variety. What do you guys see at markets?
Well, I think one of the things about it is, you can plan around, like you're saying, with the
Mm-hmm.
biennials and stuff and the annuals. You can plan around it. You can kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you know beat it out in certain ways with
Buffer it out. Yeah.
strategies, with and different hybridized varieties too, where
Mm-hmm.
like you have a tomato that's really really
Mm.
fast, and then
Mm-hmm.
another one that's a little bit less fast, etc. But yeah, there always was feels like there always is kind of a lull
Just like
in
maybe a lack of
June,
variety is a better way
July,
to
where
think
you
about
have
it.
just a couple of crops. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to do like a diversified system, at the same for I'd say for like for the consumer, the that early June and like September are kind of like
Mm-hmm.
magical times where you start to get some of the summer stuff and some of
Mm-hmm.
the like cool season stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make like a really awesome salad with fresh tomatoes and that kind of thing. But in general, yeah, I mean, I think there is a little bit of a lull in some of the. It's not like
Yeah. It's not
nothing,
bad or anything. Yeah, yeah.
but
And I'm
it's
thinking my CSA share. So like my spring CSA share ends the beginning of June, and then my summer one doesn't start until the beginning of July. And so I think some of
Mhm.
that is just, family stuff and like good on them, but there is like a gap, and I think some of that is just that transition phase where they don't have enough variety to make up a CSA share. Because it's
Yeah,
just a
and
weird
like some
time.
of the diverse stuff, it is can be real sensitive to heat, and so if you have a
Mhm.
really
Hmm.
intense hot spell, it bolts or it takes off or whatever, and then
Yeah.
it's no longer.
I think about how, day length has just affected not only farming, but just our society in general. I'm kind of zooming out here, the 1,000 foot kind of view of things. But if you think about the way that, even the time change, if it's a time change and whether or not that's a good or bad thing, some of that historically has been based on like farm labor and taking
Mhm.
advantage of the long days and how that played into decisions. But it's amazing, even with school schedules and being off for the summer and how that affects family rhythms and the
Mhm.
consumption of even things like fruits and vegetables, having time to cook fresh fruits and vegetables, or are you going on vacation to the beach or whatever. But it's amazing when you really think about it, how, yes, we're advanced as a society and we have environmental controls, we can be comfortable whether it's hot or cold outside, but it's amazing how day length
Mm.
really dictates agriculture and farming and just society overall. If you're looking at it from the broadest perspectives, that's why the solstices are, I poke a lot of fun and have some fun with that. But the winter and summer solstice and day length and all that, it just affects everything. It's
Mhm.
still
Mhm.
pretty amazing. And it goes right back down to, as I said, the time change and stuff. Here in the Eastern time zone, we, do switch back and forth, daylight savings time, so on and so forth. But some of those things are underpinned based on day length. So
Mhm.
it's still everywhere.
I have a question. So we know that in opposite sides of the world, like Australia, right? They're the opposite. They're summer is our
Yeah, their
winter, and
summer solstice is December 20th or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. So do
20th.
they call that their summer solstice, even though it's in December? Or do they call it the winter solstice, but for them,
I
winter
think it's
solstice
summer
I
means
think they
solstice.
call call it like summer. Like
Base.
they
Okay.
don't. They don't.
Summer's always hot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's actually two summer solstices, and you just mentioned it, northern hemisphere
Mhm.
and the southern hemisphere. So there's technically, we only care about one, as somebody said earlier. In the northern hemisphere, we care about our own. But yeah, it is. I always love to think
I
about that as
always
a kid.
represent my home hemisphere.
Yeah. You got to represent your
Got
homies.
to represent the
Your
hemisphere.
hemisphere. There you go. But I always love thinking about, like, on the other side of the world, what's going on.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, I would be like, oh, it's probably just hot in Australia, and I'm freezing
Mhm.
myself to death, here in Kentucky. So I love thinking about that.
Yeah, I had a colleague in graduate school who was from South Africa,
Mhm.
Mm.
and she would talk about how at Christmas time it was like a tradition in her family that at some point one of her uncles would throw a watermelon into the pool, and the kids would like try to get it, and whoever got it out or something got a prize or something, like a
Got a free watermelon.
Very summer
yeah,
centric.
a very Fourth of
Yeah.
July vibe at a Christmas party,
Yeah.
and being here. And I when I was in a different part of my life, I had went to Argentina for a while, and I actually left around the summer solstice here, and I came back around the summer solstice there, and so it was like 30 degrees Celsius there when I left, and like 30 degrees Fahrenheit when I got back, and that was a very disorienting and strange
Mhm.
experience. But yeah, I what you're talking about, Ray, with like it reminds me of that. I think they attribute it to Paul Harvey, the idea that we, despite how fancy we think we are, we owe our existence to a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it
Yes,
rains.
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's just kind of a similar, like, we're not outrunning this whole sun thing.
No,
And
it has a
the
little bit of an
way,
impact. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what marks? I mean, we're talking about. I mean, we touched on a little bit that. I mean, the summer solstice. Even though I technically know the days, are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer after June 20. That doesn't mark. So, what does? I mean, what triggers you guys for the change of the seasons in summer? Anything? I mean, is there an activity or
Going
a
into
family
summer?
tradition as far as what marks like into summer or ending summer? What triggers
Mm.
that for you guys? I mean, the solstice doesn't do it for me. I don't know what does
Yeah,
exactly.
that's definitely something that's like going on in the background. It's noticing the day length because I
Yeah.
mean, when it's like 9:20 outside and it's still like very light, it's like, man, this day just keeps on
And all the
cranking.
people with young kids are like, these kids are not going to sleep. What's their deal?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's terrible on parents. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say
Uh,
end of summer for me is when I get to go to bed at a normal time because I'm not eating dinner at
Mm.
9:30 at night.
Well, what do you
Hmm.
consider a normal time?
I
8:45.
I want to be in bed
By
probably
6
asleep
p.m.
by like I want to be dead asleep by like 9:05, like
Okay.
dead
Yeah.
Nice.
asleep.
And that's hard
No
to do when the
shade.
sun's shining out. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Sun's
Well,
coming in, and you're like,
you don't really
oh.
even mean to do it a lot of the time. Like you just get focused on a task, it's light out,
Mhm.
and usually, in the summer it's starting to cool down, so you're trying to take advantage of it. And so you just before you know it, you look at your clock and it's 8:30
So
Yeah.
you
and
would
you
say
haven't
you
eaten dinner
are
yet.
photo period sensitive.
I am very photo period sensitive. Yes,
Mm.
that will
There you
be.
go.
That's why I don't like the time change
Mm.
aspect
That ain't right.
of
That makes
what
me
we
bolt
do.
and bloom early and just go to seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bolt.
Your reproductive cycle has just
Once every
ran
10
its course.
years does Josh have poinsettia of flowers for Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess
I'm
that's
very
true, Alexis. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but it's a different kind of season. It's like when the sun shines, I want to be outside
Mhm.
doing something. And it's so weird because sometimes, in the winter I go to bed earlier. I never thought a lot about it, but it's weird to think that by 9:05, if I were to do that in June, it would be weird because the sun's
Mhm.
out. People may
Mm.
judge you. But in the wintertime, it's totally acceptable for me to be in bed by
And it's
8:45.
it also is a little annoying because you're going to bed later, but I'm also getting up earlier
Yeah,
because
right.
number one, the heat, and number two, just the sun's up.
True.
Like the
Yeah.
sun's up at 6:20, and I'm like awake. My brain
So,
is saying it's time to
Yeah.
get up.
so you're kind of on a
why
farm
are
rhythm.
you,
Yeah.
but are you also perceiving like a cumulative tiredness effect?
Oh yeah, I mean by that's why there's in you all have experience as people who have farmed, but as if since if you've not been out in a while, and a lot of people who are who are farming, we always say August is like by August 1st we are dead tired. like just
Mhm.
Yeah.
because it's this. I have to farm when it's cool enough for me to be outside. You know, a lot of farmers work other jobs, so they can't take like a midday nap. But most of them
Mhm.
wouldn't anyways, because they're going to do computer work or a bunch of other stuff that they've got to do. And so you just lose sleep for a couple months. And
Yeah.
then by August, we all ask ourselves, God, we're just so tired. Why are we so tired? Well, because it's been 100 degrees for the past month and we've been getting 6 hours of sleep every night.
Yeah, I
That's
mean
why.
that level I can I can see. I feel like though I need less sleep in the summertime
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
than in
I
the
think the
winter or
sun just, I
Yeah.
something.
seem that my
Mm-hmm.
energy seems to be, I don't know if that's a correlation with the sun and the technical aspect of it hitting my brain or the chemical reaction of our body when it's making vitamin B. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
Yeah,
or maybe
there
also,
that
is
the
something about getting.
extra activity.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Or-
say getting up and out of bed and rolling in the summertime is a snack.
E-
Oh,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
because it's not freezing cold on your feet.
Yeah. Well, and it's bright out, right? It's like, or
Yeah,
the
and it's
sun's
bright out.
coming up. But like, in wintertime when somebody's like, "Hey, let's get together at 7:30," I'm like,
No, it's dark.
"Who are you?"
No,
No.
it's dark.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving my house in
Right,
the
right.
dark.
There's
There's more
evil
friction
spirits
in the
out there.
wintertime.
Like,
Yeah.
no.
The night is long and dark. Yes. Uh huh. Anybody else have anything different besides like farming and production rhythms? Any traditions
Do you
that
know
kind of marks
what
the season?
the word solstice comes from? The Latin words sol, which is sun, and stidium, or still or stopped. So sun
Status.
stopped.
Yeah, it's
Is
like the sun just goes up there and hangs out.
and you're just kind of like, what's going on here? The glitch in the matrix has happened. Really, secretly, it's just a weird algorithm in the matrix that, like, twice a year the time gets thrown, and we're all just like, yeah, this is normal.
It's
Yeah.
fun. It's fun.
I just keep coming back to like the metaphorical components of it because like it's sort of both good and bad things. Sometimes when they are in the process of ending, you don't know that it's happening when it's happening,
Mm.
and like that even the beginning of the end of the
Like death
long
by a
day.
thousand cuts kind of thing.
Mhm.
Or just like, let's say you've been going through a really hard period in your life and something, bad happened to you, or a series of bad things keeps happening to you. Sometimes it feels like it's continuing to get worse and worse. And in reality, in the background, like, so for instance, the heat of August, right? It's like,
Mhm.
God, it's just getting worse and worse. And in the background, actually, the process of it becoming okay again has already started like 2 months ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're on
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Yeah.
downslope of
right.
the bell curve.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there's just something really like poetic about that, where sometimes you don't really your perception of what's happening and
Hmm.
the underlying architecture of what's happening don't necessarily line up.
Yeah.
And so if you're going through something really bad, that is something to at least kind of keep in mind, that it's not exactly the dawn is darkest before the or the dark is whatever, night is darkest before the dawn, or whatever kind of nonsense
Mhm.
that is, but something along those lines, that like sometimes things are getting better even if it doesn't feel
Hmm.
like they are.
Right.
Something along those lines that has stuck with me lately, it's just like been ringing in my brain, is the saying that day by day nothing changes, but looking back everything is different. And
Mm.
like
Mhm.
Hmm.
that for some reason has just really been hitting me, and like that saying has been smacking me in the face a lot, and
Mm.
I don't know why. I'm going to figure it out here soon, I'm sure. But yeah, it just
Mm.
seems like nothing has changed in the past 11 years as me being an extension agent. But when I look back to who I was when I started versus now, it's like that's not the same person. But I have
Right,
somehow
right.
done the same thing every day. So,
Mm.
but
Hmm.
it's kind of that in plants as well.
And even season to season, like with growing things,
Hmm.
it's almost, there's times where it feels in like February, it feels like it's very distant and maybe impossibly distant that you're going to be, harvesting something that you harvest in June or July. Like it just seems conceptually so far away and distant. And
Hmm.
then by the
Yeah.
time like the day by day, nothing changes. And then you look up and it's June or it's
Suddenly it
August,
has.
whatever. And
Yeah.
that's a like perpetual mystery for me of growing
Yes.
growing
Mhm.
things, existing as part of the natural world. I mean, part of it too is that, wow, 25 years old seemed like just yesterday, and then 35, and then, it just keeps on kind of
Mhm.
stacking in a similar way. And I think we have negative associations with that culturally sometimes, but there's something really wild and beautiful about that, like that contrast of like the cycles of nature kind of keep going, and our perceptions get skewed.
Mhm.
And
I think a lot of
Mhm.
the markers of time are very natural. All the things we're talking about today I mean, some of those are astronomical and they were, very cute observations made back then with kind of very rudimentary equipment. But, a lot of the things that mark time for me, I've said it before on the podcast, is exactly what you're saying, Brett. It's the growing of things. And, we've talked a lot about those cycles and it marking time, just like I guess the dog days of summer is what I think about when I think of high stinking summer in Kentucky. I used to
mm-hmm.
phrase it like that in my head, but that kind of marked the time, not the summer solstice. But I guess we have different ways of marking time and the passage of time. And it's so cool. And that's one of the things I loved about growing crops. Tomatoes was my time marker growing up because once the
Mhm.
tomatoes were all done on the vine, the indeterminates especially, that just kept producing and wouldn't stop. Once they were done, summer was over. I knew the
Yeah, you were
growing
done.
season was done. When you're mowing the tomatoes, summer is
Mhm.
done because I'm so sick of those tomatoes. I grab a big piece of equipment and mow them down. But that
Nice.
signified, I mean, it's
Yeah.
weird how I picked up these random things that marks the end of summer for me. And that was it. That was one of the
Hmm.
things that marked the end of summer. So yeah, the passage
Mm.
of time, as you say, Brett. Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
anybody still look for an adultier adult in the situation, or have you realized you are the most adulty adult in the room most of the time? Because I still look for an adultier adult.
Yeah,
I
I
do.
do. And it's usually, yeah, it's
And
becoming
Ray
less
is
and
usually
less and
me.
less.
Hi.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
mean
exactly.
to tell you that it's okay to mow your tomatoes?
Just general. It can be like
Oh,
anything.
gotcha.
Anything.
You're talking about getting older, like
Well,
becoming the most
yeah, it
mature
kind of
then?
goes back to what like Brett
I
Oh,
said,
see.
where
I see.
you're
I see.
I sensed
25
your
and then
nervous
35.
laughter. You were a little bit
Well,
nervous about that, Alexis.
well, I
She's like,
noticed it more
yeah.
when I got a coworker who is about 10 years my junior, and so
Yeah, that'll do
Oh,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so I continuously look for an adultier adult sometimes, and then I have realized I'm
Mhm.
his adultier adult, and I was like,
Yes.
"Oh
Yeah.
god,
Oh no.
don't
It
ask
hits
me.
it
I
hits
still look for someone
completely
else."
Just
different.
pull a fire alarm. Closest fire
Yeah,
alarm.
it
Yeah.
hits different, man. Yeah. It hits different. It really
Yeah,
does. When
yeah.
What?
you look around and you are part of the
And it's not always age,
ruling
right? Like,
class,
it's just
yeah.
somebody who's more experienced in an area. They're just more adulty
Totally.
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
something.
And
But,
you're that
like,
person all of a sudden.
yeah, I'm that person for our new
So are you
person.
saying that your summer solstice may have happened a couple years ago? Your days are
Right.
getting shorter? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't
about
know.
3
What are we
years ago
saying?
when my new ag agent started, bless his heart. He's, like,
Yeah.
asking general questions, and I'm like, "Why are you asking me? I don't." "Oh, I do know
Right.
things. I know the answer to that." "Okay, alright."
Mhm. I
Just
guess the
remember, Brett
springtime of
started
my
this.
life has closed.
Yes. When you realize there's more days behind than before.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Future's behind
That
you.
took
"Oh
a
It
god,
always
I'm
yeah.
gonna
was.
die soon."
That took a dark turn. Yes.
Uh, yeah. I think part of this stuff that we're talking about and that we're grappling with and whatever makes it's the reason for me why I have or had started paying more attention to things like the solstice, is
Mhm.
because it's this thing that has shared cultural meaning, but it also allows you to take a beat and just kind of
Mhm.
recognize that,
I
like,
like it. Yeah.
this summer
Mhm.
of my
Yeah.
life is at its
Mhm.
peak right now,
Mhm.
Right.
and um it's going to get hotter, yeah, but I just think that those, when we live in such like intensely culturally individualistic times, and maybe it's been that way for a while, but I think the internet makes it easier to live in a little private fort, um
Echo chamber.
and like things like when we were talking to Jonathan Larson a couple of episodes ago, or
Mm.
numerous episodes ago now, about cicadas, and talking about like the power of that natural phenomenon that just is like beyond control. And the same way with the equinox that happened back earlier
Mhm.
this year,
Mhm.
There is something really, really cool about getting out of the individual, artificial, whatever, and getting into something that feels like more shared. You know, when you walk out and you're on, it's like a five old goes west. You know, knowing that you're underneath the
Ox of the
same
Hound.
bright star, underneath the someone else's somewhere out there. Someone else is wishing on that same bright star.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think not to get too hippy dippy. And again, I accused other people of being crunchy earlier, but clearly I've joined them.
Clearly,
I
I
do-
make my own granola.
Yeah, exactly, and the yogurt as well.
Sauerkraut. Proof my own bread. Where do I begin?
The same place that I ended. I don't know what that means.
Nice.
But I do think to bring it back real just to the horticulture thing. I think that's one of those aspects of growing plants that we talked about, the joy of plants in one of our earlier episodes. That is, it's part of what draws people to this in the first place. Is there's elements of things being out of your control. There's planning. There's tending and caretaking. There's engaging with the natural world. There's submitting to things beyond your own power. And I think that the solstices and the equinoxes are as good a time as any to recognize that and
To
Mhm.
put your flower crown on and recognize it. Just sit with nature for that extra hour or so. Enjoy it. Breathe it in deep. Notice the
Yeah.
color change, the deep greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is magical and in no way explainable by the powers of science.
Absolutely not. That is all Fey magic. We have
On
no
this
idea
extension
why it
podcast,
happened.
we will talk about
Wizards.
Fairies on the blue side of the mountain.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And as a little bit of a bonus, I mentioned Dog Days of Summer, but it's interesting that that's a real thing. I looked it up. I can't remember the details. I looked it up long ago, and it could have been fake. So somebody correct me. But the
Fake
ancient
news.
cultures they'd look into the sky, and they would notice constellation movement. And Sirius, when it was in the sky when this was being observed, which is the Dog Star constellation. That was during the hottest months of the year. That was July and August. And for much of the world, that was a very hot period. So I forget the name that they gave it. It was a very Roman name that they gave this time of year, which basically translated literally to dog days. So dog days has ancient roots.
Dies Caniculares.
Is that what it is?
The puppy days? Yeah, listen to this. Hellenistic astrology connected with heat, drought, sudden thunderstorms, lethargy. God, I am so with this.
Lethargy, I'm on board.
Fever, mad dogs, and bad luck.
What's not to love about the dog days of summer?
That sounds positive.
I know, it takes a turn.
Yeah, we don't want to end on a
wouldn't
positive
have no
note.
luck at all.
Okay. That's Eeyore impersonation.
Eeyore. All right,
I was
folks.
going more Freddie King.
Okay, that's good too.
Right?
Sure.
Born under a bad sign.
Oh, Lordy. All right. Well,
bad luck. I wouldn't have no luck at all.
Well, he started. He's not going to stop.
on Brett's beautiful notes here, sing us out, Brett. Thank you for joining us today, and hopefully you learned a few plant things. Maybe you felt better about loving or hating summer. Either way, we're there with you in that grand spectrum of what summer can be and what it can be annoying about. So we hope that you will wear a flower crown. We hope that you will enjoy the solstice and enjoy those, shorter nights that are coming up. I certainly will love to get back to bed a little bit earlier. But on that note, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for helping us grow this podcast. And we hope that you will grow with us moving forward. Have a great one.